I've known Carolyn for about 30 years. When the young woman she was first showed up in my writing class in my home, she had a bad back and a story to tell. Whatever the physical cause of the back, it was exacerbated by carrying a story of prohibited relationship, such a story that breaks us to tell. Carolyn, almost unable to speak of it, referred to it simply as the Sheila story. But the telling of the story, as she now knows after many years of teaching, writing, and guiding the creative spirit, can open the way to marvels. Such a story opens and everything follows from that. There was a nascent, true writer in Carolyn we couldn't know at the time, but now we know. She is a wondrous writer, a courageous, wise woman, a dogged community builder and carrier of solitude, a profound and reliable guide. She is a wonder. Both her groundbreaking anthology, Sister Singing, Blessings, Prayers, Art, Songs, Poetry, and Sacred Stories by Women, and her book of luminous poems, Communion in Praise of the Sacred Earth, reveal her journey and alliance with Earth and the spirits. Her forthcoming book, from which you will read tonight, The Light of Ordinary Days, is aligned with the ancestors and the old ones of Ireland, with their great stone edifices that mark the entrances to the other world. Carolyn's deep knowing of these ancient spirits confirmed the realities so disdained and tortured in our times. It is this knowing and alliance that brings us together tonight as the world floods and burns. We hear the call like never before for those who will stand for the earth and for earth-based, spirit-based lives. Carolyn Bridget Flynn, reading from The Light of Ordinary Days.
It's interesting to be joining this evening. As Dina mentioned, I found her so young, and we have been together for 30 years now. And there was a point when I said to Dina, and it seemed like a far dream, I said, you know, I've got to go back to Ireland, because like so many of us in America, I felt that sense of placelessness and a lack of lineage growing up in the United States. I knew there was some Irish ancestry, but didn't know that much about it. I had gone to Ireland as a child with my family, but hadn't been back as an adult on my own. And I remember saying this to Dina, and she said, well, you'll just have to go. And this seems obvious, you buy a plane ticket and you go, but at the point she said this to me, it was like someone said, sure, you can go to Mars. You just go get the plane ticket and go. For whatever reason, the barrier seems so large. I can just say Dina has done that for many, many people on the planet, right? Said that one thing, yes, you can go wherever. So my family ancestors are from Ireland, and as an adult, after that first time, I began to go to Ireland on my own. And when I first started, I wanted to find my own ancestors. I wanted to find my cousins in Ireland and my family line. And I did. I found my living family. I found much about my own family ancestors. But what I wasn't really expecting was to fall entirely in love with the Irish landscape, particularly the sacred landscape of Ireland, the old standing stones, 5,000 years old, the rivers and the lakes, the land of Ireland, the checkerboard green. I fell in love with the land and came to understand that the stones were my ancestors and the land itself was my ancestor. So that long lineage goes back a very long time, obviously, and I found the Flynn clan goes back, you know, my father's clan goes back in Ireland, can be traced 2,000 years to, you know, a very, very indigenous people there in Ireland. So it is an amazing story to find my way back there. 20 years of traveling very regularly to Ireland. I spent the last 4 years writing a book about it, and it's part memoir, part travel story, and part a history of the sacred places of Ireland. So it's called, as Dina mentioned, The Light of Ordinary Days. And I'm going to be reading to you from a section where I'm just about embarking on that first journey. When I had first said to Dina, I need to go, and I went for 2 months. In 1996, I was 38 years old. This is chapter 12, it's called Cottage. In the movie version of this story, the camera opens with a wide aerial view of Bear Island, a small, lush green island off the southwest coast of Ireland. The day is fine, the ocean a bright slate blue. The camera pans above green checkerboard fields, then sweeps above a tiny local village of about a dozen buildings, and then moves on to the middle of the island, sweeping above a lone standing stone in an open field. Then guitar strands begin with Van Morrison's classic rock song, Into the Mystic. Right? You can hear it. Yes. The camera moves on to the southern edge of the island with massive granite cliffs, wild, gorgeous, uninhabitable. And far below, looking like small ants, a man walks with a herd of sheep in steep green hills. A seagull swoops by. At the far edge of the island, the camera pans down to a stone cottage set above the cliffs, made of beautiful gray stone, a modern glass door, and a clean new roof. Then the camera switches to a noisy scene at a harbor. 2 Irishmen direct a woman with short dark hair and pale skin as she backs her rental car over the metal plank of a ferry. Van Morrison now begins singing, "We were born before the wind, also younger than the sun." The woman sticks her head out the window, looking to the men for direction as she lets out her clutch and lurches backward over the plank. "Ah, you're doing fine," calls the bearded Irishman. "Well, not quite," cries another one. "Jesus, will you watch it? A sharp turn now. Okay, there, you're all right." The woman sits for a moment in the car, her breath a bit quick. Then she gets out and stands in the wind, her eyes toward the green island a few miles across the ocean. 3 more cars back expertly onto the ferry in a flash. The plank is drawn up, ropes are pulled, the ferry begins to move. Van Morrison sings on, "Hark now hear the sailors cry. Smell the sea and feel the sky. Let your soul and spirit fly into the mystic." In real life, it was me backing awkwardly onto the ferry and me standing on the deck holding onto the rail as we crossed green-gray choppy seas. I put my hand on my chest, an instinctive move to ease my pounding heart. It was a family trait. In that moment, I might have been my Aunt May, born in County Galway, Ireland in 1908, who lived out her life in Leominster, Massachusetts. Across the water, Bear Island slowly grew before my eyes. It was unreasonably beautiful, a sparkling green jewel. In half an hour, I was driving off the ferry, easy now that I faced forward, and onto the grassy, wet island. There was no soundtrack, but there might have been. I was 38 years old and had embarked upon the defining quest of my life. In my body, there was a rightness as to time and place. I followed directions to a house where I would fetch keys to the cottage I'd rented. From there, a young dark-haired beauty named Catherine, cousin of the owner of the cottage, led me to the far side of the island, to a renovated stone place known as Jim's Place. Pictures of Jim, an old Irish bachelor who had died a decade before, were set up on an oak bureau inside, along with a few pictures of his parents and siblings. Catherine showed me how to work the heat and the water heater and began a fire in the large stone fireplace. When I was alone, I walked through the cottage marveling. The stone walls and fireplace of the original cottage had been retained, and 2 new rooms had been added to the back and side of the house. Jim's place, probably 150 years old, was now light-filled and open. The opposite of the stone cottages I saw when I first came to Ireland at 14 years old in 1972. Traditional Irish cottages are generally dark inside, the windows very small so as to not destabilize the structure. The stones are put together without mortar. Usually they're stone or whitewashed mud, depending upon the environs. But this cottage had been opened up. The interior was finished with white walls, and 2 skylights and a glass door poured light into the rooms. I admired the tasteful, simple art on the walls. I could hardly believe my good luck. Through an unlikely set of circumstances, this cottage had become available to me on a remote island off the southwest coast at an affordable price. This would be my home for the next month, to rest and read, to write, and ponder my recent visits with cousins in County Galway and Roscommon, and to encounter the spirits of my ancestors, if such a thing was possible. It was August, a warm evening. Though I would experience all manner of weather during my stay, that first night was balmy. I sat outside in the long, bright summer air and even felt the need to put on sunscreen. I gazed out at the sea. The vista was startling to my soul, so beautiful as to be almost wounding, wide, open, and deep. I had glimpsed the island's massive cliffs as I drove to the cottage. The sea was loud and wild. Beside me were a few books of poetry, and my journal was open. But all I could do was sit and stare. I put up my feet and closed my eyes. This was going to be great. I wrote for a bit in my journal, and then, out of the blue, it hit me how utterly alone I was. I was a woman by myself. Who knew who lived on this island? Had word gotten out that I was there by myself? Scenes from violent movies, all the awful things done to women flashed through my mind. No one would know if anything happened to me. No one expected to hear from me for several weeks. I looked out at the sea and felt the great edge to which I had come. What was I thinking? I saw myself, a small defenseless woman before the great expanse of the unknown. I walked back inside, pulled on pajamas, and crawled into a little twin bed in the back room. I heard noises on the road and jumped. I wrapped 2 blankets tight around me, feeling more vulnerable and alone as darkness descended. Maybe I would have to leave tomorrow. This was a little crazy. Just now there was nothing to do but hunker down and get through the night. I would figure it all out in the morning. 4 dreams decided the issue. In the first dream, I awake in the cottage, alone and frightened. I hear noises in the living room and realize that someone has broken in. I screw up my courage and walk out into the front room. I move to turn on the light, but the lamp doesn't work. I try to shout, but in a familiar dream moment, only a squeak comes from my mouth. Then I hear a noise out back. I go to the side door and see that a car is parked in the road behind the cottage. Its bright headlights beam past the house all the way down to the sea. There in the light, a group of matronly women in Sunday dresses, rather like Aunt Bee of the 1950s television series Andy of Mayberry, frolic in the waves. They pull off their shoes and run in the surf, kicking up the water and laughing. I woke with a start. It had been so real. It took a moment to comprehend that no one was in the cottage. No car was parked behind me. No women were dancing in the ocean. I scribbled down the dream. My heart was slowly calming from dank fear and adrenaline from the early part of the dream. But the ending, it fell into the category of just plain crazy cool. In the second dream, I wake again with a start, feeling yet again afraid and alone. In the dark, I sense other presences and realize that a small cat sleeps in the bed with me. Another cat is curled across the room. A dog is rounded on the floor by the bed. They must be the animals of the house, I think. They want company. The dog sleeps peacefully. I realize that he would bark if there was danger. In the dream, I drift easily back to sleep. In the third dream, a thinning old man walks me around the cottage. He shows me how certain doors and windows work, points out art on the walls, and orients me to the place. In the dream, I think it's probably old Jim, the bachelor Irishman of the cottage. Then in the fourth dream, the wife of the couple who renovated the cottage shows me around. She knows pieces of art that she has put up, where she stores candles and other things that make the place beautiful. She wants to make sure I am aware of them, that I realize their beauty, and will take care of them. I woke and opened my journal to write the dreams down. I could still sense the comfort of the animals, and though I knew they weren't there, found myself glancing around for them. I walked through the house. The morning was an Irish morning, not much sun, but daylight had returned. The quiet cottage was just itself. I reasoned that serial killers would probably not choose a tiny island where they couldn't fade into the crowd. And there was no way to get away except on a ferry that didn't leave until the next morning. I remembered talks with the owners of the cottage about the friendly neighbors across the road who were familiar with Jim's place and would be willing to take me on a walk up into the hills. I looked around the little place. It was rather a mess. I'd hardly put away the groceries, and what little I had unpacked from suitcases before curling up in bed was scattered about. I ate a breakfast of toast, apples, and Irish tea, and set about making the house right. I've had thousands of dreams in my life. They've scared me, bored me, made me scratch my head, made me happy. I've had nightmares I couldn't shake for days. Dreams that hovered above, tantalizingly out of reach. Dreams that left me out of sorts. Dreams that were luminous, like the time I realized I could fly and soared above the neighborhood. I have seen extraordinary dream work done by Jungians, African healers, and Native American medicine people. But in all that time, and in the 20 years since those days on Bear Island, these 4 dreams strike me as the most direct and generous of any I've ever had. What poured down to me that night was the purest of welcomes. What are dreams? I have studied and worked with them for much of my life, but what they are remains a luminous mystery. I asked this question once of a North American shaman, this person who often received mythic dreams and could dream on behalf of others. She had a fluid, thoughtful, and daily relationship with the dream world. But in answer to my question, she said she did not know. She knew how to work with dreams, she knew how to live by them, but she didn't know what they were. My wife, Jean, is a frequent and deep dreamer, and this part of her life connects her with her poet's soul. To her, it's obvious that the earth and the growing world before our eyes is sacred, but that there are other worlds, which are part of this one or close by, that our lives can be lifted up by something invisible. That is made clear to her by the fact of dreams. If I had been wondering about whether we can be lifted up by something invisible, as I made myself small and little in the back room that first night, feeling the dark expanse of the world and every bad thing humans do within it, I was no longer wondering about this upon waking in the morning. I was clear-headed and calm as I set about my first day. In part, I had unwittingly been given the heebie-jeebies by my sister Mary just before I left. I was telling her about my upcoming journey to Ireland, including my plan to stay alone on a little Irish island for a month. Like others, she had concerns for my safety, staying alone on a small island that none of us had heard of before. Then she said to me, "Are you afraid of fairies?" "Well, no," I responded. "Why would I?" Years before, my lovely sister had surprised the family by marrying a Palestinian Muslim and then converting to Islam. She had a wide and beautiful faith that clearly sustained her. She prayed 5 times a day, bowed down with her whole body. When in public, she wore a veil. She was still one of the funniest people I knew, one of the deepest and smartest. She was still my sister. But I did not imagine that fairies had much currency in her Muslim worldview. I learned that night, in fact, that Muslims do believe in fairies, known as jinn. The jinn not only exist in folklore, but are described in the Quran. The tradition differentiates between angels of the celestial realms, humans who are earthy and made of clay, and the jinn, said to be created from fire. The jinn, Mary told me, came in all forms. Some were beautiful, helpful, and friendly. Some were jealous of humans, and sometimes caused havoc or even harm. So just be careful, she said. They favor lonely places and the sea. Well, I didn't know what to say. Maybe until then I had even sort of hoped I would come upon a fairy or two in Ireland, as in I wanted to really meet the traditions of the place. Many Irish country tales tell of people taken by fairies to a magical place where they are happy for a long time, maybe 100 years or more, until they begin to miss human life and want desperately to return. But these stories were from a long time ago. I was surprised to learn that my devout sister absolutely believed in small creatures who lived in the hills and the deserted places of the earth. Creatures who were not visible to humans, but who could see us, take human form, and mess with us and our stuff. Sometimes they stole things, Mary mentioned. Now I was sort of chuckling. Really, sister? Like the little green men or the leprechauns our mother liked to blame for the disappearance of our belts, shoes, school papers, and the sweater she could never find? Our mother had been told about the little green men by her father, who had heard of them from his Irish mother, Kate Ryan Carey. The fairies made their way down to us, little green men scrambling about our 1950s house in America, and they were mostly harmless pranksters. I pictured them down in the basement in some invisible closet, hoarding loads of our stuff. But they didn't trip us or harm us or occupy our bodies or take us away for 100 years. Well, no, I told my sister, I'm not afraid of the fairies. I don't really think they want to harm us. That belief might protect you, she said sagely. Jotting down the dreams that morning, I could feel that a small grace had come. My sister was right. There were jinn in the uninhabited hills and wild places. Fairies, known as the She in Irish, or sometimes simply called the good people in country Ireland. I'd been incredibly lucky that the spirits of this place were so welcoming. Now I walked outside the cottage and looked to the sea. I'd come to Bear Island with the hope of connecting with my family ancestors, yet those who had come to greet me were the local spirits of the cottage itself. I had no ancestry from that island, no previous connections there at all. A small part of me thought, who are you? I've come for my own people. But the actual world always insists itself. The land, the material world of stones, houses, trees, and rivers have their own spirit and have imbibed the people and histories around them. This is what the Irish tales tell us, that spirit can and does inhabit places. Fairies are totally present in modern Ireland. They are said to be specific to a certain tree, or a bend in the river, or standing stone circles, or a fairy ring. They attach to land and place. The fact that in my dreams, old Jim, who had lived so long in the cottage, wanted to show me around, that the current owner showed me the beauty she had created, that the spirits of the animals of the cottage had come. Well, it all made a kind of quiet sense. It was physical, local, and strangely ordinary in an otherworldly kind of way. Thank you.